Good evening, everyone. Afternoon, both, wherever you're at, joining us. Hi, Peggy. How are you doing?
Hi, Jaime. I'm doing great, and it's great to be back.
Yes, it is. I imagine you had a good weekend. I hope.
I did. How about you?
I was. It was bittersweet. My niece moved out, and she's been
Oh,
living with us for about 2 years to go to college. And so, I was like, I'm really sad to see you go, but I'm really happy to get your room back because that's where I like to take naps when she wasn't here. And it's right across the hall right there instead of
me
going
too.
upstairs.
Yeah.
So so there was that. I was like
Yeah.
sad to see you go, but glad I could take
Where
naps
was
right
that?
across. Anything fun happened in your world this weekend?
Um, well, besides booking my birthday trip to Key West, that was the most exciting point.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Can like when you say that real quick, let me just say it that seems like some far flung off idea, right? To be able to book a trip like that. And like in my mind, I think about when the kids, so I have daughters, I think about when the girls are all graduated and out of the house, and it's like it's just me and mommy again. I'm like, oh, I can't wait for that day to happen. So
It's
it, it-
nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
People are joining us online. So we got Ron Hughes says
Hi,
he's
Ron.
here, and someone else on LinkedIn who says
Oh,
we're muted. If you can't hear us in person, we are not muted. We hear each other.
yes, we
Ron, can
do.
you hear us too? Wait to see if someone else tells us if we're muted or not. But either way, I'll keep continuing until we get more people
Yeah,
say that
because
we're
we're
muted.
unmuted, and I can hear
Yes.
you. And
So
yeah.
I feel like everything's fine. I'm looking on my screen.
Okay.
Yeah, I went on the YouTube. I can hear us too there.
Okay.
So we're good.
Fantastic.
All right. So yeah, so that happened. Before we get started, I want to just share with everyone real quick. There is a very cool event happening, and I'm gonna do this in the beginning, and then I'm gonna do it again in the end. But I want to share it because I think it's cool for those who are tuning in right now, for you to hear it and see it. And then again, I'll redo it again. But later on this year, PCI is going to have their this one's not the North American. This is the Dublin
The
uh,
Dublin
PC
European.
European
Mhm.
PCI meeting, right? So they have one in North America that's going to be in Portland, Oregon, Oregon,
Oregon. Yes.
and then one in Dublin, right? So
Yes.
if you look on the site here, and I'll post this up in the chats. And if you're on LinkedIn, I will make sure to get it posted on my LinkedIn. Actually, I have it posted. Um, but you can scroll down here, and depending on where you are at, for example, I myself will be attending as part of the general public right here. And so if you look, there's a live stream option that's there right now, right? It's a little pricey, but I'm going to make sure I can attend virtually so I can listen to everything. And we have our very own Peggy Nolan, who's going to be there speaking at this year's conference.
That's
So I
right.
want to make sure to listen to you, Peggy, live and encourage
Awesome.
you, but also get out of it as well.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself interested to go, there's some pre-sale going on right now until October 8th. And then the standard is from October 8th to October 26th. Now, the general public price for me, it goes $495 right now. If I wait till get to the standard, it'll go up $100. But you can go out there if you are part of an organization that is a participating organization. There's pricing for you. If you're part of a community or something else, like just look at all the options on there, read them, check it out, and make a choice. But you can go out there and check that out. Okay.
And I think this is the first year they're also making, just if you want to go into the exhibitor hall, you can get an exhibitor pass
Neat.
just to go into the exhibitor hall. And from what I understand, all the vendor showcases sold out for both North America and Europe. I don't know about Asia Pacific yet, but it's going to be, I think, a great event no matter where you're attending.
Yes. So if you're interested in that, if you have more questions, look in the website. I will make sure to get a link posted on the YouTube and on my LinkedIn so that you all can check it out and look at it at your leisure. If you're in the Discord also, I've already posted it up in there as well. Just make sure we get visibility for this for everyone. If you want to attend in person, you're free to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
But
it's
you can,
free. You can come if you want, you know.
yeah.
You know.
I will make sure we'll make sure to do another blurb edit at the end for Peggy, since she's going to be speaking at the Dublin one. And for any of you, again, just questions, let us know. But wanted to throw that out there. Congratulations, Peggy. I'm really excited and happy to hear that you're going to be speaking there.
Yeah, so. I am. I'm super excited. I love going. I love the ability to connect with my peers there, as well as my friends. I have a lot of friends that are there that are either speaking or they're going to be part of the audience or they're a vendor. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Plus, I'm going to Dublin, so why not?
Yeah, like if you got to go, I mean, you twisted your arm good enough, so
I did.
Might as well.
Yeah, and I have family there, so it's a win-win.
Oh, that is so nice. That is so nice.
One point to make is when you go out to, no matter which conference you decide that you're going to go to, whether you're going to go live or you're going to stream it, be sure to check out the agenda, and then you can go to the speaker page. And some of us speakers have created a 90-second video, showcasing what we're going to be talking about. So I actually have a video on my speaker page, which I've also posted on my LinkedIn page too, but it's kind of cool. And I'm way down.
There are a lot of speakers there. That is good.
Yeah.
But it's a multi-day event.
Yes.
So if you're curious about that, everyone, it's not just one day. There's going to be multiple days. 3 days. Yeah. Okay. And
3 days. I'm speaking on Thursday as part of a panel. Yep.
So you can click on the speakers tab. There's Peggy right there. You can click on the speakers tab and it takes you to all the speakers in here, and you can click on them like she said, and it's right there.
Yep.
Lots of topics. I assume they're going to be talking about 4.0, right? That's going to be one of the hot topics, I'm sure.
Yeah,
right?
4.0 is definitely a hot topic. The majority of the speakers are actually from the council themselves. There's a few other speakers that I know there's one from the University of Washington who's going to be speaking about their experience as a university, getting PCI compliant, and having been involved with WPM education. I know how tricky it is for universities to maintain compliance.
So. Interesting. Yeah, they have, just for perspective, they have so many payment channels, right? Like there's so many different areas, right? You have late fees in the library, you've got lunches in the cafeteria, you've got events in the Coliseum, in football games, and you just start stacking all the book fees, not the attendance, but what do they call that?
The registrar's office, where you pay for classes.
There you go. That's what I mean. When you get a ticket, you got to pay for parking spots, all those different areas in a university. Like that seems like that would be a very, dare I say, fun experience machine. But anyhow, so yes, I can't wait to see. Do you know? I see that they also have the agenda out there, so we'll be able to see.
Yes, the agenda's out there, and I'm actually speaking. My session is, I think it's the last session of the last day. So it's Thursday, October 26th. I think we're on at like 12 or something like that. So I think we're the last session of the day, but it's probably, I think, one of the most important conversations to have, which is why you need to speak the same language as your QSA. So why it's so important to have an ISA on staff, and more if you can afford it.
Yes. So what I'll probably do at some point here in the near future, everyone, is I'll come on and do a special kind of like CyberGangsters episode where we just kind of review the agenda, we look at the speakers, and maybe just kind of see what in general. That way you all can be informed, right? And we can just look at this together and see. I'm not going to cover everything because there's a lot of speakers and a lot of topics, but maybe just look at some of the things that, for me, that I find exciting to see myself, what I'm going to be looking forward to. So, yeah. Well, with that said, Peggy, thanks again. We're coming on tonight to speak about something pretty specific, right?
Very specific. Important. Yeah, it's kind of like, a journey of 1,000 steps begins with the first step. And so I apply this thought also to the very first step in PCI is scope.
Yes.
If you
So
don't,
with that, you taught me a valuable lesson when it came to scope, and I continually have been moved by it. And it's funny, people have come to me, Peggy, and they're like, man, your idea about requirement zero being scope, and it's like they're like blown away. They're like, it's kind of shifting the way I'm looking at the requirements these days. And I'm like, first off, it wasn't my idea. Secondly, I know exactly what you're feeling like because that's what I think too. And
right,
it puts it into a new perspective, right? Because I think when we look at requirements, we see the requirements and we see those controls as being the necessary method to compliancy, right? And so we see those as like the hardcore facts, right? Scope is one of those things that's been like in the past always felt like that little whispering wind in between the requirements. Makes sense? But you helped us see early on how requirement zero being the scope, that has to be necessary and first before we get started into everything. And so when I looked at it that way, it made me see it as this concrete absolute that has to be done just like the requirements do.
absolutely. So I'm going to read y'all a little poem, and I know some of you have heard this poem before because I I recited it at the North American Community Meeting last year in Toronto because I did my 20-minute stand up on scope.
You talked 20 minutes on on scope.
I did my stand up routine in 20 minutes on scope.
Okay.
I threw in a few jokes too, so I was like, "Hey, I'm here. I'm playing here all day." This poem. So before I even read the poem, the fact that the council has actually put scope as a requirement in version 4, unfortunately, it's requirement 12.5.2.
It's buried deep in there, isn't it?
It's buried deep in there, right?
Yeah.
So I need to like really shine as many lights on scope as I can and unbury it from requirement 12 because it is literally requirement 0. And I also didn't come up with requirement 0. I can't remember where I saw it. I can't remember where I read it. It has just been with me for years. Requirement 0 is scope. And the smart person who is running the compliance program, the PCI compliance program at, I don't care what level merchant it is, right? If you're not looking at the executive summary of what the QSA needs to fill out for a report on compliance, or if you're not looking at the executive summary inside a self-assessment, you are missing almost everything you need to do to assess. Because if you don't understand your scope, your assessment is boulder dash. You don't know what you're assessing.
Right.
Because you haven't got a grip on your scope. So when you look at the breakdown in the executive summary, and I share this breakdown in a bunch of checklists in our resource center. So you have to understand the networks that are in scope. You need to understand the networks that are out of scope because you have to pen test from out of scope networks. You have to understand all of your databases that are in scope. You have to have an inventory of JavaScripts and API scripts, and you need a complete inventory of all of your third parties. And I go over that also extensively in the third party matrix, which I break down so that people can track their third parties. They're part of scope. Your assets. So for most people, they get the fact that their servers are in scope. That is where people go, yeah, that makes sense. They forget about people and processes. So let me read you this poem and then we're going to break down scope. Okay. So how can you get very far if you don't know who you are? How can you do what you ought if you don't know what you've got? And if you don't know which to do of all the things in front of you, then what you'll have when you are through is just a mess without a clue of all the best that can come true if you know what and which and who. It's a Winnie the Pooh poem.
That was so you are creative. And that was in the speech last year. So
Yes,
that
it was.
that is so much better than my I word played a little bit in the little promo, if you remember an old 80s song. So that's funny that you brought in your poem today. So I appreciate the artistic input that you provide. Thank you.
Yes. So the poem actually comes from a book called The Tao of Pooh by Benjamin Hoff. It is one of my favorite poems to reference scope.
Okay. So let's break it down let's break it down at the beginning. So any new learners that are out there, Peggy, and people who are trying to grasp this, when they hear requirement 0, even though it's, in an actual requirement in version 4.0, what can you help us see scope as in its most basic form for new people watching today?
Fantastic. All right, let's break it down to the actual definition of scope. I don't make it up. I am the messenger. The definition is in the DSS. I think it's on page 13. So it's not in the requirement section. It's in the front section that most people just skip right on over.
Yes. I always tell learners, I'm like, when they're going through requirements, I'm like, did you read the first 17 pages yet? Make sure you read the first 17 pages and the last ones that have the appendices back there, okay? Don't forget them. Valuable.
People just want to just get to the requirements. It's like, no. Read the directions first.
It makes sense. It doesn't make anyway. It makes sense.
So we're going to read the directions.
Yes.
All right. Per PCI DSS. The PCI DSS security requirements apply to all system components included in or connected to the cardholder data environment. So you think of your cardholder data environment is in the middle, and I do have diagrams in the course that I teach on scope. So everything that is connected to, things that impact security, things that provide segmentation, and things that provide security. So you have things that impact security and things that provide security. So those 4 components make up what's in scope, all right? Mm-hmm. Now, furthermore, the cardholder data environment, so that's your CDE, is comprised of people, processes, and technologies, right? We get technology. We forget people and process. Now so people, processes, and technologies that store, process, and transmit cardholder data or sensitive authentication data. Now, system components include things like network devices, servers, computing devices, applications, etc. There's a whole laundry list of things that are included in system components, all right? Mm-hmm. So you really have to put your thinking cap on because it's more than the server.
Right. So would this also entail the tangible and intangible things? So not the tangible being, like you said, not just the server and all the other pieces, but is software included as scope as well?
Absolutely. You have applications, and what runs on the application? Software.
Just want to make sure. So everyone, that, a piece of this is you got to look at it practically in a way, right, Peggy? So when you go into a restaurant or a retail location, think about what you use your credit card on. That would be part of the things that are in scope. So if you go to a gas station, you actually physically swipe your credit card into the gas terminal pump. Yeah. And so that would be something that scope would apply to that. That machine is in scope, right? When you go to the retail store and you swipe your card on the little POS device to, for your credit card, that is scope. When you go to the restaurant and there's those little kiosks that are at your table and you actually touch the chip reader on it, that is in scope. So anything, from a practical perspective that you can look at that, those are included, as well as like Peggy just mentioned, the software pieces and the other aspects that are behind the scenes, right?
Now you have to start traveling with the card transaction.
I like that. I like that.
We'll get there in just a second.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
All right. So I think this is also important to note. The PCI Security Council Information Supplement, there is another supplemental document that people like forget about. It's out there and it applies to the requirements. Guidance for PCI DSS scoping and network segmentation. We're not talking about network segmentation tonight, but that document combines both scoping and network segmentation. Okay. And now this document states that the following scoping concepts always apply. 1, systems located within the cardholder data environment are in scope irrespective of their functionality or the reason why they're in the cardholder data environment. Similarly, systems that connect to a system in the cardholder data environment are in scope irrespective of their functionality or the reason they have connectivity to the cardholder data environment. And in a flat network, all systems are in scope if any single system stores, processes, or transmits account data. So I want to talk a little bit first about the points 1 and 2. If the system is inside the cardholder data environment or connected to, it doesn't matter what its function is. And I've kicked I've kicked systems out of the cardholder data environment. Once upon a time, we had a team build an encryption service and decided to put it in our cardholder data environment. And unbeknownst to them, they are now in scope for PCI DSS requirements. So they have to meet hardening, configuration management. They have to meet logging, vulnerability scanning. They have to meet all of the requirements that, are across the board in the DSS. And after a conversation with them, I asked them, I said, well, why did you put this here? Why did you build out your system in the cardholder data environment? And the response I got was, just in case. And I said, well, you have an option. You can comply with PCI DSS, or you can find another spot to put your service. They left the cardholder data environment. So that was a lot of fun. And I think we lost Jaime. I don't know where he went, but he did tell me to hold down the fort and he should be back. So that is the definition of scope. I can't see any questions, so I have to wait for Jaime to come back. I'm sure you might have some questions. So we are going to move right along and we're going to talk about requirement 0. And even though the council has now put scope as a requirement, it's 12.5.2 in version 4. I still refer to it as requirement 0 because there's only a subset of what I cover in scope as part of the actual requirement. So the best thing that I can hope that you take away from this is that an accurate scope will help you ensure that the right security controls are in place for people, processes, and technologies that store, process, and transmit or are connected to the cardholder data environment. The more accurate your scope, the easier it is for you to maintain continuous compliance and the smoother experience you'll have when you have to do a report on compliance or a self-assessment. Hi, Jaime. How are you?
Sorry about that, Peggy. Yes. I didn't catch anything that you were saying, so I was. I'm gonna just hop on the train so we don't have to be too distracted.
Can you see if there's any questions that came in?
Because I can. Let me see. We've got some hellos from people. Why not? No, we are good.
We're good. Okay, fantastic.
Oh, wait. I see version 4.0 of the PCI DSS already in use. And what do you think the difference is?
That it's now a requirement. It wasn't a requirement.
So in regards to scope, I think that's what he's asking, right, Dennis? Because I think that's what you were talking about just before, while I was gone. So yes, if you have it, if that answers your question, great, Dennis. If not, just ask it again in a different way for us. Travion says, Arthur Pinkerton, I see what you did there.
I don't know
what that is either.
I don't either. Okay.
Janae, right. Oh, hi, Janae. Can you repeat what you said about what was brought into scope?
If it's in the cardholder data environment or connected to, and it doesn't matter what its functionality is. Are you talking about the encryption service that I had a team build out in the cardholder data environment just in case?
Oh,
Yeah, I kicked him out.
what?
I did. I kicked him out. I said, there's no reason to have an encryption service that has no bearing on my cardholder data environment. And I told them, I said, you have the option. You can stay, but it's going to cost you. You have to be PCI DSS compliant. So you have to meet all the logging requirements, the hardening requirements, the vuln scanning requirements, the access control requirements. You have to, submit evidence all the time on your system that you built out here just in case. And they moved. They found a new spot.
Yeah. Outside of the
cardholder data environment. Okay. They had no reason to be there.
Yes. Okay.
But anybody who says, yeah, I built it out just in case. Really?
Those JIC moments, huh? They don't work all the time. So
no. So I very nicely, I gave them an option. You're more than welcome to stay, but just know that you're going to be hounded all the time.
LinkedIn user PCI software requirements, new ones this year, correct? 1.2.
It's not 1.2. It's in requirement 6, I believe. I don't have it in front of me.
And that's fine because 4.0 is officially not.
It's not in play yet.
It's not in play. Yeah. There's a lot of learning to be done over the course of the next 2 quarters. So and I'd like eventually, Peggy, we would hope to do like maybe a what's new in 4.0 or some of the stronger pieces, whatever we can speak to. So we do want to deliver information to you all that's helpful. Peggy has some resources out there too on her resource site.
I have a ton of resources, but to be honest with you, if you don't know your scope, 4.0, who cares? Almost who cares?
Yeah.
It is, I do care, but if you don't know your scope, and if you can't get compliant with version 3.2.1 because you don't know your scope, 4.0 is going to be it's going to be an even bigger challenge. While there are 64 new requirements, 54 of them are best practice, but some of those 54 that aren't applicable until 2025 are seriously going to cause issues and problems for merchants that don't have a successful continuous compliance program.
Okay.
Because if you're still struggling with version 3.2.1, version 4, you're going to feel like you're drowning.
Because there's so many more requirements, plus the fact that you have to have scope. Well, I mean, you kind of have to have scope now, but it is an official requirement, right? Like it's kind of, I hear what you're saying, but it goes to the point that scope is going to be necessary now, and just like it's going to be tomorrow.
It was necessary 10 years ago,
right? And I think that's important, right? Because a lot of times, so here's and I don't know if you're going to cover this later, and if we do, stop me now, and we can wait till it comes up naturally later, Peggy. But one of the challenges I see sometimes with scope is, I get it for a lot of people who don't know what's in scope makes sense, but even for people who have experience with it, like, how do you know, when you don't know what something's in scope, when you don't know something is in scope and it should be, and the organization doesn't know it's in scope and it should be, are there times when that type of scenario comes into play? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And that has happened in the past at my former company. Again, we discovered that somebody built out an encryption service that had no business in the cardholder data environment. And we politely showed them the door. And over the years, Lisa and I got better at, so Lisa Cressy, just for anybody who's new, we're business partners, but we worked together for 10 years. We ran the PCI compliance program at a level 1 merchant. And now we do this together as a business. So I refer to Lisa. She was my partner in crime. She still is.
And there's some previous videos where Lisa came on and talk about continuous compliance, and you can go back and review those later on, but you can review there earlier. She did a great job. It really shifted my perspective on, maybe not shifted, just added to it, right? Every time, Peggy, that you or Lisa are dropping knowledge, I always feel like I'm adding more layers onto the base understanding that I had. So I really appreciate y'all doing this and really helping us understand. Really great contributors to the community for PCI related content.
So what I do want to talk about a little bit is you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And I would tell people I'm only as good as what you tell me. And if you don't tell me about the collections department that you have, how am I supposed to know about it?
Yeah, you're not a mind reader, right? You're not the business whisperer.
I wasn't the business whisperer. I worked in IT. I worked in the cybersecurity team.
We have a saying for this. I'm a data analyst, right, for a big company over here, and we have a saying for this. We call it garbage data in, garbage data out.
Right.
If you don't give us the right data or information, we're going to crunch the information you give us and apply our skills to it, and then we're going to give you a product based on that exact same information. So if you don't give us everything that you have, you're not going to get everything back.
So how I found out about the collections department is we had discovered, and I can't remember exactly how we discovered it, but we discovered unsupervised credit card data on the network. So I opened up an incident ticket because I knew about it. And I said, this is the best way to deal with it. And I even told the CISO at the time, I said, we have unsupervised data. We need to open up an incident ticket. So I know this is going to cause bells and whistles to go off all over the place, right? I said, just be on this. Just know that this is going to happen. And this is why we need to open up the incident ticket, because this needs high visibility, because we need to stop this, right? We need to do something with this. We have to take immediate action because it's running unsupervised.
So let me real quick on those, for those of you who haven't been in that environment, it's just like when you call the cable company because your cable stopped working or your internet stopped working. In enterprise environments, there's similar path for that type of situation. And so that's what Peggy's talking about. When there's something that needs fixing or addressed, you create this ticket, you put in a call to the powers that be, and it has to go through a certain level of attention, right? So people in different departments, depending on where that issue looks like it's stemming from, it gets people's there's visibility put on it, and they can't ignore it. So when she's saying all the bells and whistles, she's meaning like, all those alerts and chimes are hitting for someone to physically look at the ticket and address the problem that she's bringing up to them. So just behind the scenes.
It was one of those elevated issues, and not for anything, guys. I was opening up incident tickets back in 2013 for unsupervised credit card data. Guess what? In version 4, it's a brand new requirement for the incident response team. So if your organization is not opening up incident tickets for unsupervised credit card data on your network, you have to now. So get your incident response team on board with this. It becomes effective in 2025. And it should have been effective, 2006 when it all started. But I was doing it since 2013. I'm like, well, an incident ticket, that just seems logical.
Well, when the industry decided it should be cool, Peggy was already making it cool before then.
Okay? Cool.
So there's a couple of comments here I want to read off for you because they are firing off. So let me. Can you repeat? Yes, here we go. PCI. Oh no, right here. All right. Should companies jump on 4.0 now or wait till next year when 3.2.1 expires?
If you are not gap assessing right now against version 4.0, you are missing the boat. But right now, I will tell you that the 11 new requirements for companies that already have their scope together and they have a grip on their scope, the 11 new requirements, I know there's 12, but one is only for a service provider, all have to do with scope. The brand new requirement for scope, 12.5.2, and then all the 1.1.2, 2.1.2, 3.1.2, blah, 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 .1.2. That is roles and responsibilities, which is a scope issue.
Okay.
It is scope because people are in scope, people in processes. So a system administrator who is in charge of PCI for the in-scope firewalls, routers, network security controls, whatever, if they don't know they're in charge or responsible, there's a problem. Okay.
Wow.
The fact that the council had to call out roles and responsibilities as a specific requirement blows my mind.
Right. Right. It's crazy to think that an organization doesn't understand the capacity that their people need to fulfill in order to be compliant, to be safe, right?
Right.
Like that's what I hear when I think about that. That's what it makes me think of. It's like, because remember, everyone, and not for Peggy, but for everyone else out here, the requirements are the base
It's a
set,
baseline.
the baseline, right? They're the minimum basic requirements or controls, however we want to say that, for being compliant. They are not like, the standard as far as the creme, right? The premium option. It's not the premium option. These are the basics. So for an organization to not have the roles and responsibilities of their different departments
Already outlined for PCI.
it's
Sorry.
a little crazy, right? Like they have to know what they're responsible for. The engineering team, which is the department that is all of IT, like they all should know their roles and responsibilities when it comes to the controls in PCI.
Yeah. So, I mean, for example, we had 30 system administrators, or we had 30 in-scope technologies. That meant I had 30 system administrators, and each administrator had a manager. Now, that manager could have managed several of those system administrators, but my system administrators were responsible for evidence, process and procedure, during the interviews, blah, blah, blah. And then their manager was the actual control owner. They were accountable for making sure that the system administrator got in the evidence that they needed to, did their documentation reviews as required, blah, blah, blah. So I already knew who was accountable, who was responsible. And because we had continuous compliance and they got tasks, through our automation, they knew when to submit their evidence. But long story short, you can't jump on 4.0 if you don't know where you are with 3.2.1. So if you don't have your stuff together with 3.2.1, you have to get smart with it now. Today, yesterday. Then
So
you
right now,
process for version 4 and you figure out what you need to do, where your gaps are, and you get the remediation done. Now, you only have to do the remediation for the first 11 requirements that are active for 2024. But you might as well gap assess for the other 54 because you have to have budget. Some of these are going to be big ticket items like multi-factor authentication across the board. For
anything dealing with cryptography, those are going to be big ones.
Those are going to be big ones. So those are expensive. Multi-factor is not cheap. The other one is automated daily log reviews. They're no longer, you can't do them manually anymore. Effective.
Oh, really?
So you better.
That kind of makes sense though, right? Because manual is like when you see, every time I saw manual in there, I'm like, who hires someone to just sit there and look at logs all day? And then who has the capacity to discipline themselves to be like.
But believe it or not, it happens. And I remember talking to the guys at Verizon, and there was a report that came out that said how many alerts come into a security operations center. Thousands.
Yeah.
A day.
Yes. And I remember seeing those when I worked for an organization that had call center capacities. Man. Yeah. You're talking pages, within an hour, a lunch period. It can be daunting.
Very. And you have to understand what's important. What do you need to look at first? How do you prioritize those alerts? But at any rate, did I answer your question, Tox? Don't jump on 4.0 if you're not cool with 3.2.1 yet. You have to be good with 3.2.1 and you have to gap assess. If you're brand new and you're just starting, just go to 4.0 and look at it. I think we froze. Did we freeze? Oh my goodness. Jaime has frozen.
I'm sorry, I'm back. So Dennis asked a question that says, if a system is out of the CDE, the cardholder data environment, is it still in scope?
I don't know. Is it connected to the cardholder data environment?
So those are some of the questions you have to ask because it's not clear cut. It's not a 100% black and white if it's specifically within this, let's just say like this room right here where I'm broadcasting.
So when you look at my diagram that I have in the resource center for this particular course that I teach on scope, the middle of it is your cardholder data environment. Those are the primary systems that store, process, and transmit, right? Then you have 4 more circles that connect to the cardholder data environment. These are connected to systems. So these are systems that impact security, provide segmentation, or provide security, right? They don't have to sit inside. They're probably on a periphery VLAN. Okay, you might have 2 or 3 VLANs that are PCI specific, which is, if you can organize it that way, it makes it easy.
It's awesome. Yeah, VLAN is like it's a special IP or network connection. Stands for virtual. It's a special connection dedicated for whatever purpose the organization declares, and only certain components would be on that line, right? So if you have a computer that's outside of the CDE, the VLAN would say only computers with this IP address or MAC address can connect here. And so any other computer outside of that address range doesn't have access to the CDE. Hope that makes sense.
At least we hope it doesn't.
Yeah. The problem with all of this is a lot of times you have user error involved, right? So that's always going to be the challenge. It's like when I talk about data with my company, I'm always like, data that I can gain from the systems and the databases that collect the information is great. When I have to rely on user generated data or input, it can be tricky. It's that there's an error rate of some kind that exists in there because we as humans can make mistakes. I can fat finger a 6 when I needed a 9, for example. And when you're talking in millions, or that makes a huge difference. So just keep that in mind, that we are going to rely on these system components and their designations so long as the user input involved in it is as accurate as it can be.
Right. And I do want to point out also for Dennis is that if it's a flat network, all you need is one system that's storing, processing, or transmitting, and everything on the network is in scope. So
it looks like Lisa, I didn't see this, but Lisa kind of got to him prior. So thank you, Lisa, for watching. Lisa is Peggy's partner. So yes, she was the one she was talking about earlier. So if you haven't yet, it looks like Dennis was like, he just followed her on LinkedIn. So yes, if you guys can go reach out, just want to throw this in there real quick. If you see people who are in the chat, feel free to go on LinkedIn. Peggy and Lisa are on there. I've connected with both of them. I get their updates and their posts every day, and I can learn more about PCI through that. But also the other people in the comments, connect with them so that you can build your network out more. It's amazing when you start making those connections and you can ask questions, and the responses you get, or even the comments you have, people out there can either validate you or help correct you or just teach you new things. Okay.
Right. So from where we are right now and looking at how much time we have, I'm just going to ask a question for the audience. Oh, thanks, Mike. What would you like me to go over? Would you like me to go over the 5 common mistakes most organizations don't know they're making with scope? Or do you want me to go over our 6 simple steps to manage scope? So Lisa and I created 6 steps to manage scope. It's ours. It works. It's like having Lucky Charms every morning for breakfast.
I just had those last night for the first time, and I don't know how long. So it's so funny you said that. Throw option 1 or option 2 in the chat, and I'm going to read a couple of comments real quick while you all answer Peggy. All right. So nice to listen to Peggy again. Tox says yes.
Good. Yay.
Mike. So now log reviews must be on SIEMs.
Yes, on the SIEM. Yeah, they need to be SIEM. So I lived in Germany for 3 years. So the I before E says it's a SIEM pronunciation. So,
okay.
So it doesn't matter. Potato, right?
Yes.
So yes, they're automated. So SIEMs are not cheap. They're expensive, and maintenance agreements with them are very expensive. Ask anybody who has Splunk.
Oh, yes. Yeah. It's a great tool.
Great
it's
tool.
A really expensive tool.
It's very expensive, but Lisa and I befriended it. We really liked Splunk.
All right. Sure. Perfect lecture on scoping. Janae said mistakes.
Mistakes.
Pasley says 6 simple steps.
Mistake.
Demario says mistakes. David says number 2, which was
the 6 simple steps.
Yep. 6 simple steps for Mike. Shavita says scoping mistakes. So
gosh, it's 50-50.
I think, yeah. So we need someone to come in here and give us a tiebreaker. It's so funny.
So, okay, which one I do tonight, I'll do the next one next week.
Oh, okay.
And if you're already a member of our PCI Resource Center, you have this material, but it's always great to hear it again and again and again.
So Dennis says
material is mistakes.
We'll go with mistakes because Darnell wasn't helpful. He said either
one.
one.
Either one. Come on, pick one, Darnell.
And Victor, he also said both.
All right. So I'm going to do mistakes.
Yes.
I'm going to do mistakes tonight.
Okay.
I have
fun. I'm going to try not to interrupt you, Peggy, so that we
can
get
have fun with this one. And some of it's a little repetitive, but it's okay. Hi, Arthur. All right, so we're going to do mistakes. All right, so mistake number 1. Organizations don't understand the definition of scope. I've given you the definition of scope. I say it over and over again. And it's funny, Lisa and I used to joke about this. And I said, I just need to record myself and just hit play every time somebody says, why is that in scope? Or that's not in scope. That was my favorite.
You need your own magic 8 ball.
Right. Is this in scope?
Peggy says.
Not today. So I really wanted to have a recorded message on scope. So I actually got smart. I actually had training that I did at my former company. And I do some of this training is kind of available in the PCI Resource Center. But how I did it for our former company is I talked about scope at first, and it was recorded. And I said, every year, everybody has to go listen to this. And I don't want to hear you ask me why this isn't scope again. I really don't. I mean, I fielded that question so many times that I was like, you are a connected to system. If you don't want to be in scope, figure out a way or find a new home. Find a new home for your service that has nothing to do with the cardholder data environment. Or I would sit there and go, you're connected to because you provide X, Y, and Z service. Sorry. And the cardholder data environment can't live without you.
Such a toxic relationship almost sounds.
Yeah, it was like they didn't want to provide what they needed to provide on a regular basis, whether it was access reviews, proof of doing whatever, depending on what they did. They didn't want to be bothered with it. And I was just like, I'm sorry, your system provides a service. The cardholder data environment needs it because you are a shared service.
Right. So Lisa says, but they are gold when it comes to collecting evidence.
What is gold, Lisa? But they are gold.
Yeah. So I think when she's saying that the service provider, they're great at collecting evidence when there's an issue, but when you need something, they're not.
All right. So I want to tell you a true story, and I tell this one often. So once upon a time in a faraway place, my former company stopped storing cardholder data. It was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. But the business subsidiary that stopped storing cardholder data environment told the VP or the president of that particular company told the big CIO that we didn't have to worry about PCI compliance anymore because they stopped storing cardholder data.
Oh, wow.
But
the CIO believed them too, right?
He did. But we were still transmitting and processing. So when PCI DSS switched from version 2 to version 3, that's when they stopped doing their own tokenization, and we just switched it over to the acquirer. They had a great tool. They did it for us and sent us back a customer reference number, but we're still transmitting and processing. And we had to go to the CIO to ask for $2.5 million to beef up our infrastructure and do some things to remediate for PCI compliance. And he's like, what do you mean? I was told we don't have to worry about it anymore.
Oh my gosh.
I was a fly on the wall. I was listening in on the phone. I had prepared all the slides for my manager to present it to the CIO why we're still beholden to PCI.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I can only imagine the joy he had hearing he didn't have to think about PCI this year, and was like all those extra funds everywhere. And then the request to come in, and he's like, no, we're fine. And then that bubble got popped, and he's like, oh my God.
And it was a request for money that was off the budget cycle. So
man, so Peggy, like, how does that I said I wasn't going to ask you, but it just, we talked about this thing I'm gonna bring up in the past before about, like, we need that buy-in from our leadership, right? A lot of the people in the C-suite, we need that buy-in, and sometimes it's hard to get. You can have a wrench like this. It's a major wrench, right? There's no way around it. It's a major wrench thrown into the system, and it's like, wow, the CIO made the decision from the top. That's the top. That's right up there. And we talk about buy-in, how difficult it is, but we have executives making decisions like this, and it's like,
I think that was, I could be wrong, and if Lisa's still on, she might correct me, but that was the last huge mistake that the C-suite made. After that, they went to me and Lisa. They didn't listen to anybody else.
Okay. Ooh, what a costly.
That was a costly thing to believe without validating and verifying with the two experts on staff.
Yeah, Dennis is like, no way. Yes way. Michael says, yikes.
Really happened.
Demario says, oof.
Yeah.
And then,
but you know what? But that mistake, it's not in isolation. Organizations across the board make similar mistakes and decisions because they don't understand the definition of scope.
And more so, or not more so, but in addition to that, it's that they don't have the right people in place with the knowledge to decide, to help them make these decisions.
The business that did this had nobody on their staff that knew PCI. The two resident PCI people were in, we were either, I was in the cybersecurity team or the enterprise security team at that point. We changed our name overnight one day. And Lisa was with hosting SecOps. So she was running the sustainability program while I was managing the overarching PCI compliance and the report on compliance. So she and I worked together very closely, and we were like the example of why teams from other groups need to work together.
Yes.
Okay. We were always on the same page, and it took a while, but we finally got enough people on the same page that would never again would that kind of mistake be made.
Nice.
And 6 years later, when I had to pull the plug on completing a report on compliance in 2019 because of a serious problem that had to be fixed, and we didn't have enough time, and I just said, we're done, we're stopping. That information I did all the legwork with the presentation and the slide and why we're stopping. And it was our CISO who presented it to the CIO, why we're stopping a ROC in 2019 and we're not submitting anything. And we're going to follow the rules and do what we're supposed to do with the acquirer and bank and what they're telling us to do. But nobody made that kind of mistake that was made in 2013 ever again.
Wow.
They came to me and Lisa. So when I stopped the report on compliance, my manager understood, my senior director understood, the CISO understood, and she explained it to the CIO. And while they were disappointed that we had to do it, they knew we had made the right call.
Yeah. If it came from you saying it wasn't just some random, decision that came up. So
And
get that.
Lisa knows I agonized over it for a week.
I can. And so in the little time that I've known you, and I feel like I've made some good like rapport with you, I can totally tell that had to have been.
I don't think I slept for a couple of days.
Oh,
that decision, and I knew it was going to have. I swore up and down, I'm gonna tell everybody we have to stop the rock, and they're gonna fire me. They didn't fire me.
Oh, and I've definitely felt that. So we got a couple comments here. Looks like Lisa was clearing up her comment from earlier.
Oh, the SIM.
Gold when it.
Oh, it is. It is absolutely gold, and we're actually getting into why it's gold because right now we are creating the content for our log management course. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're covering most of requirement 10. There's 2 areas that we're leaving out, but we're covering log management. And we are going to spend time on the SIM because you have to have one come 2025. So you might as well get that budget in place now.
All right. Dennis says, is it okay if a level 1 merchant company is not signed up for networks segmentation, maybe?
Sure, as long as they want to have everything assessed as in scope, that would be like a fortune.
Yes. And that's what we talk about a lot, right? Scope is important because it helps a company, on their side of things, it helps an organization mitigate costs to what's needed, not to everything, right? You can walk into an organization and you could totally everything. You could totally do everything, but it's unnecessary.
Your assessment would just be always ongoing.
Yes.
Nobody wants to live in that kind of environment. So if you don't have there is no requirement for network segmentation. Just know if you don't have it, it's a flat network. Everything's in scope. Everything.
Oh, and yeah, Lisa, yes. Dennis, if any merchant doesn't have segmentation, that means they have a flat network and the entire network is in scope. So yeah. Arthur says, Peggy, do you find, if any, the companies that have an ITIL program have a better scoping effort for PCI? Hope that makes sense.
No. ITIL and PCI are not the same thing.
Yeah. And I get the idea that it would, but I don't know for sure.
So that's like, I don't know.
So for those of you out there who don't know, ITIL is, for a long time, was like Britain's best kept secret in the IT realm. And we adopted it here in America. And it stands for Information Technology Infrastructure Library. But basically, it's a methodology for how an IT department would run. In its basic form, that's what it is.
It's not the same. ITIL is not the same definition as PCI has for scope. I don't even know what ITIL's definition of scope is. PCI is PCI is PCI, and trying to compare it. This is the struggle I had for years when they would say, could you please map PCI to CSC and NIST and ISO? And I'd go, why? Some of these are frameworks. Some of these are or map PCI to GDPR and New York DFS. Why? PCI is so prescriptive. I'm never going to get a direct match with anything. Because if you're not looking at what evidence you need to collect and you're just trying to do this mapping on a requirement by requirement, you might get some halvesies.
Right.
Like it matches it halfway. But then you toss in the evidence that you need to have to prove your due diligence and prove you have a defensible position. They don't match.
Right. For example, you could say PCI asks for readily available logs within the last 3 months.
Right.
But a map to maybe NIST or one of the other ones, they might say they need 1 month or 12 months readily available. Now you need logs. Both of them are correct in that you would need logs readily available.
But PCI is different.
Yes. So that's why what Peggy's saying, that's makes sense part of it. It can't be a perfect match.
It's never a perfect match. And I remember going through and doing a map to the CSC controls. And I'm like,
jeez.
So I did it. I did it just to say I did it. And I'm like, you never make me do that again. This is I know you want to follow CSC as an organization, but we have to follow this for PCI, and you signed a legal contract. So we have to. You can't try to say, oh, we follow CSC, so we should be good for PCI. No, we're not. because CSE doesn't tell you what evidence you need to have. It's just you need to have an asset inventory.
And it's so insane. Like some of those cross connections, the mapping or whatever you want to call it, it can be so massive sometimes, right? Like what you're saying, like CSC, I roll my eyes. So for those of you who don't know, it's huge. It's massive. PCI is 12 requirements with some sub requirements in there. Yes.
Well, no, there's 400 requirements.
Right.
Like
and then CSC, like, but you could have one requirement or one sub requirement in PCI, for example, and I'm just exaggerating here, but you could have like 10 CSC controls with that sometimes. And so mapping it just gets out of control. And if you're not careful, you're compounding work that it's like, okay, am I PCI or am I CSC? Because this is...
The acquirer doesn't care about your CSC controls. I mean, I guess at some level they do care, but they want your report on compliance.
Right. At the end of the day, you have to submit your report on compliance, not your CSC controls.
Yeah.
So, and I got my PTSD coming back, so that's why I'm like, I'm gonna.
I get some of that too. I get a little anxious.
So, ask us about it individually, separately, at some other time. Maybe we could divulge a little bit more. But
I need a cookie.
I need to go get some ice cream real quick. Anyhow, so
the companies that have a better handle on scoping are the companies that understand the definition of PCI scope, and they follow a process. It doesn't have to be our process, but we have a pretty kick-ass 6-step process. It's really easy to follow. But let's get into problem number 2, which has to do, this is mistake number 2, which has to do with not understanding the definition of scope. It is overlooking people and processes. I'll never forget the very first report on compliance that our former company was trying to get across the finish line. Now, they were still a level 2 merchant, assessing as a level 1, but it took them over 18 months to get it because they forgot that they had call centers. It's not that they forgot. They didn't think that the people that were keying in the credit card numbers, talking to the customer over the phone, that they were in scope. Yep. We had 3,000 of those people. That means,
and that goes back to what you were saying in the beginning, right? Like, it's not just like the hardware, and it's not just the software. It's the biological piece too.
It's the biological piece. And let's not forget that we had 13 call centers, and each one of those call center agents had a device.
Oh, wow.
So those devices had to be brought into scope. And because they were laptops, at that time, there were also some desktops floating around. They were on the network and they're processing. So that was bringing our entire network into scope because they weren't segmented. And there was no way that they could segment these devices. So we had to do this layered security approach, which was really kind of kludgy. It was like playing Jenga. So we had a host-based firewall rule set that was really kind of null and void because they couldn't get rid of any rule in there.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, we just left what? You have all these you have like, I think we had 15 rules, and then the last rule was an any rule. And I'm like, you just null and voided everything.
Everything. Yeah. And I get it, and I hear that, and I see that in enterprise organizations a lot of times, Peggy. I see it's like, they're like, well, we did that because we don't want the CEO to be upset that they were denied access to Instagram.
And it was like that host-based firewall. Well, no, we deployed it to everybody because it was part of the antivirus system. So it was deployed to everybody. And I'm like, just deploy it to the people that are in scope.
Yeah.
Anyway, so overlooking people and process. Now,
Mike says, so scope of PCI DSS covers people, processes, and technologies.
Yes, that store, process, and transmit, or are connected to that systems that store, transmit, or process. Yep.
Michael says, any rules?
Any rules are, hey, no, they invalidate the entire rule base.
Yeah, you're right, Michael. Yes.
Yeah, they are a pain, and it's like, stop being lazy. Have a specific source and a specific destination. Otherwise,
all the network admins right now are like, y'all don't know what y'all talking about.
Otherwise, what you have is a 5-way intersection with no traffic light. And everybody's trying to go.
Everyone gets free. Just, yeah.
All right. So things that get overlooked, and I say this because these things, I've experienced them being overlooked. System administrators on technologies that people didn't think were in scope. Billing processes like collections. Or the fraud team.
Okay. The what team?
The fraud.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Guess what? They're storing credit card data because they have to investigate fraud.
Makes sense.
Collections. That one bit me in the butt. Call center agents. Third-party vendors.
So you got a vending machine in your organization, and that takes credit cards. There you go.
No. Yeah, third-party vendors. Your hosted payment page provider. Your say you have maintenance for your routers and switches because you don't do it yourself. Whoever, say it's Cisco or whatever, they have access to these systems. That now they're a third-party service provider because they come in and perform the maintenance on them. We actually kept them out of the cardholder data environment because we were like, do you want them in scope? Because if you give them access to these in-scope routers and switches, we have to have specific contract language. We have to meet 12.8. And guess what? They have to have an attestation of PCI compliance.
Yeah.
So they said no.
That's clever. You know what I mean, Peggy? Like, I appreciate your experience because there's that level, like when you can look at more than just those pieces. You know, there's so much technology, software that are involved. When you look at people, everyone, and I'm not just you, Peggy, but to most everyone I'm talking about, like there are just layers sometimes when it comes to PCI, and you don't know what you don't know, but you got to look at things and be like, you know, who is involved in some of these things that throws them into, scope, that throws them into scope. Like having people just available in the same room of something makes them into scope.
Yeah.
Anyway, it might save some of you who are getting in the field or are already in the field, and you're wondering when your organization asks you, you know, how can you save us money in this area outside of already being compliant and getting people in compliant that saves money. You can look at this and be like, where are the people involved in here too? Is there any way, like, do we need them to go in there and do those things anyway? But
yeah. So, all right. So the third big mistake that organizations make that they probably don't even know they're making is they forget to follow the money. So the credit card is the money. If you are not following from when the credit card hits your system and your network, and you're not following it all the way through to find out what systems is it going through, what is it touching, who's touching those systems, and what processes are involved. And this is everything. This is also, how does the application work? Especially if you're an organization that has your own applications, right? You're not using a third-party vendor. You wrote your own billing application, which is fine. You can do that. But you have to know all the ins, outs, and everything about it, right? And then they won't keep following the money, right? So you follow it through all your primary systems, but then all the connected to systems. It's when you do it right the first time, it gets easier to do this. But the 6-step process that I'm going to take everybody through next time, I actually call it follow the money.
I like that.
Follow the money.
On that, so one, you know, I want to highlight Lisa's comment here because Demario asked if there was an automated tool for identifying scope. Lisa says, Demario, not that I am aware of. The best way to identify scope is by getting your network diagrams, which will contain IP ranges, then have your network pen tested.
And it's also an exhaustive set of meetings to review all. It's not just the network diagram. It's also all your cardholder data flow diagrams. So you have 2 sets of diagrams. And if you have more than one way of accepting payments, you're going to have more than one cardholder data flow, right? We had 9.
Peggy. And never mind the idea also that these some of your organizations aren't just going to be centrally located within your time zone, but if
Right.
you have any that are going to be international, and you've got to work with different time zones, and so that means getting more people involved and meeting those, because not everyone's going to be available at your 2 p.m. or 10 a.m. meeting, and so it's like, well, we're gonna have to figure out some time to meet with those people and interview them for the pieces that they need or we need from them. So
Yeah. So getting the network diagrams with the IP ranges and then getting a pen test, that is part of it. That's not all of it, because
mhm.
you also have to wait. There is no automated tool that's going to pick up all your people. There is no automated tool that's going to pick up your processes. It might pick up your assets.
I would say that's probably the only thing, actually, because I'm thinking about my experience on the other side of things, Peggy, and the tools that we've had. They won't, they can never account for it, and if they could, they're going to be tools that are user input required. You know what I mean? So, like a manager of the department, they would have to input how many people and devices, and then even with that, it's like I said earlier, when you have to involve people to gather data, it's not 100% right.
No, it won't be, but the better you get at it, and because in
Like
our
you said.
6-step process, we have, I mean, the DSS is telling people to do it every 12 months or upon significant change or whatever. And I'm like, no, you have to cross check your physical inventory at least weekly.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I'll get into
Yeah.
that next week. And there's a big reason why. But then, people you can probably cross check twice a year. Changes to the network, you need to check in every 3 months for upgrades, software updates, things like that. But we'll get into that next week.
Okay.
All right. The fourth big mistake is accountability and ownership. That also goes with not knowing the full definition of scope. Now, accountability and ownership, I have been talking about this, I don't know, since 2013. And now it is finally a requirement, which kind of blows my mind. It's like, how do you schedule an interview for a report on compliance if you don't know who the control owner is or who's responsible for getting you the evidence?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So accountability and ownership is a huge mistake organizations make when they don't have their roles clearly documented and that the people are trained. I mean, I was on a training mission for 6 years. I trained teams all the time, and then I got it down to the annual requirement for annual training.
Impressive.
And it was mandatory at the beginning of every report on compliance. It was like, over the course of 3 days, you have to pick the day that you're going. I am taking attendance. And the last time I did it, I had like a 95% attendance rate. So, I mean, I was off the charts with everybody attending. And I was very disappointed that one of the people that didn't attend my training was my senior director. And I'm like, dude, you think you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
The CISO attended.
Wow. When your CISO attends and you don't, though.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So the fifth big mistake that organizations make is manually tracking hardware and software. I go into this in the 6-step process that we have, but the quicker you can automate your asset inventory and get it in a centralized repository that you can query, that people who need access to your inventory, like say, I don't know, the vulnerability management team, they need to know what assets they have to scan on a quarterly basis, or more frequent. We did scanning monthly. Our configuration scan team, he needed a weekly update because he was scanning for configuration drift weekly. So if he's scanning weekly, our asset inventory needed to be, cross-checked every week.
Right. And that makes sense, right? Everyone. So, we were talking about how so one of the things that's helped out is like SCCM, right? That's a Microsoft tool that organizations can use that monitor what Peggy's talking about. It monitors the assets that are on the network and ensures they have the most up-to-date software, the patches, all those things are installed. if an organization is using independent or third party even, or anything where it's user driven, there's someone who has to go through and manually check those things. There's there's likely a high chance of gaps to be found within that organization when it comes to that. And the data to get all that, it's an insurmountable amount of time to collect that. You may not meet your your completion for your rock to get oh my gosh, to get it done, submitted, to get it submitted. So the leveraging the tools out there that can help organizations, like you're going to have probably, in my experience at least, you're going to get a quicker return on that. What Peggy's talking about here. So because those assets can be tracked and monitored remotely, and everything's just generated in a nice report, literally clicks of buttons, and you got everything right there.
Yeah. And, not for anything, but the other, system administrators responsible for like requirement 2, requirement 5 for antivirus, requirement 7 and 8 for access controls, 10 for logging, and 11 for vulnerability management, scanning and stuff. You have to have an accurate asset inventory because they have to be able to do their jobs. Mm-hmm. And they can't do it if they don't have, they can, but if they have bad input for assets, we're going to have bad output for results of what they're responsible for.
Like how you said that. Yep.
Yeah.
Arthur, this is what I was referring to. Practices that have standardized automated methodologies that then in turn help out the scoping effort. Yes, Arthur, they do help out the scoping effort. They're not 100%, but they do help out. And if it's accurate and can be validated properly, then yes, absolutely.
So in order to get but first you have, so when we go over the 6-step process next time, you have to get the asset inventory into a centralized database. So, and the only way you do that is by going through, you have to go through other steps. You're not just going to use a tool. You have to take your network diagrams of the cardholder data environment, and you have to take all the cardholder data flows. The cardholder data flows and the network diagrams need to be in sync.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
That's where it starts. And so to actually, if you are doing an end-to-end scope assessment the first time, it's going to largely be a manual effort to get it in place first. But once it's in place and you have a centralized database that you can query and that other people, other teams have access to your in-scope PCI assets, and just remember, that's only the technology part is only 1/3 of what's in scope.
Yes. I appreciate the piece on that. Like it's not all reliant on you, that part, right? You're going to have other people involved in gathering all that information.
Absolutely. So, you don't do it's not a one-man job.
Yes. And that's one of the takeaways from Peggy right here is it's not a one-man job on that part, on that last part talking about. So don't feel like if you don't understand how this means, if it's a large load of information, it's not something that you need to tackle on by yourself, right? No, it doesn't get completed
alone. It's a team of 15 people in the room, especially to review the cardholder data flows and the network diagrams. You need your network security architects, your application developers, anybody else who's involved with those two things, right? You might need somebody from finance because they have to explain how cards get processed.
Field support. Field support are the people who are going to be on the floor, like in the call centers, who are actually replacing components as they're breaking and being replaced, and updating those asset tracking information.
Yep.
So there's a lot of moving parts to it. Control, Peggy, talking about this and thinking about this, I'm reminded in our previous discussions about how, like, when we see some of the job descriptions on some of the posts out there for positions in cybersecurity world, how they're so cookie cutter. A lot of times they don't understand. Like, this is information that's been shared today that you can take to your, listen to this from the beginning again until you can kind of get it down. And when you go to your interviews, when you go for those opportunities that come up, when you are looking for that IT position, this is stuff that you can talk about and say, look, I am interested in making sure that asset tracking is a big deal, and I would love to take up an effort, or I see that as important. All the talking points that Peggy has talked about tonight is stuff that you can include in your discussions or your interviews, or with the company that you are and you want to see them grow in their cybersecurity department. Things that you can recommend. So take all the stuff that Peggy is talking about tonight and write your notes and get it all down. And it is, yes, exactly what Arthur says right here.
And then if
this is awesome discussion. Loving all the tips and insights, a treasure of information. I agree with you, Arthur.
And not to shame, I am going to shamelessly plug all of this information and more is in our PCI training and resource center at paymentcardassessments.com. We spend there's a lot of stuff that we have just on scope. We have more than just the course and the guidebook. We have broken it down into individual, I call them cheat sheets, but you can literally print off the PDFs. Say you're going to go do a partial scope assessment. You want to understand what networks are in scope and what ones aren't the ones that are out of scope. You can print out those PDFs and then go have a conversation with the network team and just get that written down. That's going to take you maybe 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. Right. I have a whole matrix on the service providers, and I'm going to be doing something separate for service providers. There'll be like a mini deep dive course on service providers. It's coming. I'm focused on log management this week though.
No worries. So this is Peggy's website she's talking about. Payment Card Assessments LLC. If you see this screen, if you've done a search for it, I put the link in the chat. I believe it's only going to show up in YouTube for reasons, but you can see it here. And
you can sign up for our free master class, 7 proven strategies. And then if you want to become a member of the Resource Center, it's a monthly subscription. It's massively affordable because we believe in making PCI compliance affordable because we want everybody to get on the same page. And we also have coaching available if self-service is not for you and you want one-on-one time and attention.
So thank you so much. I'm going to give you, Peggy, a couple seconds here, or whatever you need. I always give Peggy or any of our guests who come on just a moment to kind of share whatever they want to share with you all. That's just them, not hindered by me at all. So I'm going to give Peggy that time.
Jaime, you're not a hindrance. You are amazing. And you being able to host something like this is fantastic. I think it helps get the word out about PCI compliance, and not just PCI compliance, but continuous PCI DSS compliance. Compliance is not a project, it is a program. And that is what we teach organizations how to do. We teach them how to implement, build, and sustain a very successful continuous PCI compliance program. There's a few ways that we do this. We do this through automation. We have a tool called Polaris PCA that can really help set up an organization for success when it comes to continuous PCI compliance. We have automated the compliance aspect of it, meaning the assessment piece of it. So we use a project management workflow tool. It is amazing, and it contains everything you need to complete your assessment and to run a continuous compliance program. We also have an education segment, which is our PCI DSS Training and Resource Center. We are teaching people how to do what we did. We teach what nobody else is teaching. The council is fantastic when it comes to conveying what needs to be done, but it doesn't convey in a manner that people understand how to do it. And I know that they really try. Their guidance is getting a lot better in the DSS, which you can read. But it's still, how do you take 300 or so requirements and now implement them inside an organization? It is easier said than done. But we have the know-how. We have over 20,000 hours of experience doing it. So we kind of know what we're doing here. And that's what we try to help organizations do. And then our third aspect of what we do is we teach organizations how to operate effectively and effectively and efficiently. So we look at processes. So we're looking at how mature are your processes? How repeatable are they? Because if you have repeatable processes, you could probably automate them, which would bring you right back into the first pillar of our 3 pillars of PCI excellence. So that's automate, educate, and operate. And I look forward to helping you learn more about PCI DSS and helping you stay continuously compliant. I can't hear you, Jaime.
I told myself, don't forget to unmute yourself too. I was going to say, thank you so much for your kind words, Peggy. If anyone doesn't know, words are my jam. So I get super built up when people say nice things to me. I know, but I know myself well also. So I am very encouraged when people say things like that. But very good knowledge here tonight, Peggy. Lots of great stuff here. I'm glad everyone in the chat showed up and was asking questions. I appreciate that. Peggy appreciates that. Lisa, thank you for being in the comments tonight too and helping back us up over here. I have this giant fly that has been flying around the last like 15 minutes or so, and I'm like, please stop distracting me. And the corner basement room, the rest of the house, and literally somehow it finds its way down here. I don't know how. It just, yeah. Anyway, Peggy, I'm going to put you in the green room. Thank you for hanging out with us tonight. I'll talk to you here in a little bit. I want to just sign off and give everyone a couple more words and share the oh my gosh, Europe community meeting again. Okay. So hang out and thank you again. We will see you next week. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everyone. So check this out. I just wanted to share again. We talked about it at the beginning, but yeah, I put the link in the chat earlier in the show, but you can just search PCI. Like I did a search for PCI Dublin, right? So who knows? I don't ever look for Dublin, but I've been looking for it more often now because Peggy's going to be speaking there this year, right? And so when you come here, you're able to scroll, or not here, but there is a registration now open button. When you click on that, it'll take you to the registration page. For me, myself, I can't say this is going to be everyone, but for myself, I'll be joining as general public as far as I know right now. And if I sign up, if I register before October 8th, it's going to charge me $495 to join so I can watch virtually, because I will not be able to attend physically, which I'd love to, but I will be watching virtually and looking at all the different speakers and the content that they're going to be. I'm definitely going to make sure I pin in my spot for Peggy speaking. You can go to the speakers page and look at all the bios of everyone who's going to be speaking, including Peggy. And some of them have some videos up there, as she said earlier. You can look at the agenda and it'll tell you what the different topics are. I do plan on coming back here in a special like weekend episode where I'll kind of explore some of the speakers and the agenda topics that I'm encouraged and I want to share with you all. So that way you can just hear some perspective on it, right? Then there's a standard fee after October 8th where the price increases by $100. So just be mindful of that. And I am so happy that you guys continue coming back and listening to the CyberGangster CyberSecurity community. I've always said it before, I am not someone who is just content with consuming content, but I love creating content to help encourage the community. Has a lot of C words in that sentence, okay? I am very happy that I found people like Peggy and Lisa, as well as learners who come on to share some of the success stories and other helpers who have just wanted to give to the community. So if you feel like you are someone who can talk about something specific that would encourage the community, reach out to me and let's talk so that we can put something together where you can come on and do something similar, okay? With that, you guys can find me on LinkedIn and on YouTube. We're here every Wednesday at 4:30 with Peggy right now. And if you have ideas for future shows, please let us know so that we can get the content built out for you. Okay. With that being said, we will see you all on Wednesday. And I've actually got another show I've got to do tonight. I have another show I won't tell you all much about, but it's the social and distancing show. Been doing it for 3 years, and we're always talking, just a couple of my friends and I. And on Wednesday nights, I do this, go break and hang out with the family for a little bit. And then I come back on, and not for Cyber Gangsters, but I do that show. So make sure that while you're learning and working hard out there, that you're doing something fun for yourself as well. That'll be my message tonight. Do something that's fun for you this week, something that gives you some energy, some life, that you get some encouragement out of, and just enjoy it, okay? All right, everyone. Well, you all have a great night, and thanks again. Take care.